Greetings, fellow Planeswalkers.
I'm James.
And I'm Paul.
And you're listening to the newest episode of the Commander-at-Arms podcast. This week on the podcast, we are listing our top 10 cards from Innistrad Crimson Vow. We know that set hasn't come out yet, but this is everything we've seen so far. These are the cards to be on the lookout, and if you can pre-order them, maybe pre-order them, or be looking out for them when you crack your packs. In our upkeep trigger here, we want to thank all of our patrons for your love and support, for allowing us to do what we want to do to get content out to your eyes and your ears. If you want to become a patron supporter, you can do that on patreon.com/commanderatarms. We have 3 tiers there. Go and check it all out. Now we have Mail Day and interesting finds. Paul, have you bought anything spicy or found anything delicious?
Nope, nothing for me this week. I've had an exciting past few weeks for that, but this week has been largely uneventful.
Dang. I mentioned last week that my wife picked me up a birthday present for 3 brand new commanders that I haven't built before, and I got them in. I'm going to share them with you now. I'm going to put pictures up on the Instagram as well. But I got Kenrith, the Returned King. So there's the 5-colored Wooburg commander with all the activated abilities under the sun. I got Korvold, Fey Curse King, sack things and draw cards. And then I got a Layla, Artful Provocateur. We all know those 3 commanders from Throne of Eldraine. It was her favorite set, and she wanted to see me build decks around those 3 commanders. So I took that challenge upon myself, and I've started to build. I have 1 deck complete, which I showed you, Paul, just before we started recording, and possibly do a deck tech on it in the future. And after I get it played and sleeved up, played, and then tested a couple of times, so I can refine it and see if I like it or if I need to change it. I also managed to pick up a retro-framed foil Fabled Passage from one of our sick group Facebook pages that you and I are both in, Paul.
Love that page. I've definitely made some questionable decisions on Facebook that way.
So have I. And I also managed to, I'm going to say this now, but I'm probably going to say it again, because it's Crimson Vow, and I did actually pre-order 1 single card from this set. I had store credit from TCG Player from buying through them without, maybe using our own affiliate link there, bit of a hashtag subtle brag, but tcgplayer.com/commanderatarms if you want any of the cards here or any singles or any sealed product or anything. I got a bit of kickback, and I used it to buy a foil Thalia Guardian of Thraben from Crimson Vow, because I love that artwork. 2, she finally got a reprint and is decently cheap at the moment compared to her other printings, and I got it in foil. So I mean, 3/3's a winner, and I got it with all store credit. So I'm loving life right now.
Yeah, Thalia is definitely a sick reprint. Wasn't really expecting it, to be honest, but looking back, it kind of makes sense. That card sees play in so many places. Like, it's one of the few creatures that, despite being legendary, you'll see in play sets in a lot of decks. And, of course, non-commander formats I'm talking about.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it is in a standard set, so we probably will see decks with maybe 2 or 3 copies in their deck, because as soon as you see a Thalia on the table, you have to kill it, so you have to use your removal spells on it to then just play another one and just really annoy your opponent. But in Commander, it also works really well, because I'm going to be putting it in my Tulane deck, because that's what it's there for. It's a Staxy piece that stops my opponents from doing stuff while I kind of break parity and play mana dorks, draw cards, and put lands down. But anyway, enough about that. We have a deck tech to promote here on the channel, and we're actually going to promote last week's deck tech, and that was the one that Paul put together for Max and Lucas from the Stranger Things Secret Lair. So please go check that one out. I know Paul spent a lot of time on that deck, so if you can show that deck some love, that'd be fantastic. It's sitting about under 30 views at the moment. I'd love to see it get to about 100. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but it definitely helps us out and shows us that you guys are interested in the content that we are creating for the YouTube's channel. So yeah, go and do that. youtube.com/commanderatarms. Go and check that one out. Definitely leave a comment, like, subscribe, do all the stuff that the Facebook algorithm requires you to, so that you can help us get more content out to you. And we have our play of the week, Paul. Have you played any Magic? Calling you out again.
I actually haven't played Magic in like a few weeks. Things have been getting kind of hectic at work, and usually after I go to work and then go to the gym, come home, cook dinner, it's just like it's too late and I'm too tired to sit down and play a game of Magic. And the usual group that I play with on Sundays, we haven't been able to get together for the past few weekends, unfortunately. So no Magic for me.
Dang. I actually literally got a game in about 2 hours before we started recording. I woke up to a message from my friends in Australia and was like, hey, playing a game? And I was like, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. I'll get up, make coffee, and I'll come play a game. So I did. We were only able to grab 3 of us, so it was 2 of my mates in Australia and myself. I played Lathril, Blade of Elves Precon with a small amount of upgrade, just kind of taking out some of the bad mana dorks and adding in better mana dorks. And kind of really changed it to being not really abusing her activated ability, but really relying heavily on her activated ability to be the way that I win the game. And so it's a lot of untapping shenanigans and everything. One of my other friends was playing Elsha the Infinite. It was a control deck. I was not aware that it was a control deck until I started being controlled, and having to ask permission to play anything that I wanted to. And I have something a little spiteful to mention later on. And then the last deck was Tuvasa of the Sunlit, I believe her title is. She was the Bant Enchantress commander from 2018, came in the Estrad deck. And he's playing Bant. He was playing Bant enchantments, and we had a fun game. And you're playing elves against a control deck when they mana drain your 4-drop.
I mean, to be fair, that's not actually that bad value.
I mean, it's not, but it was just an elf that kind of like, when it ETB'd, I got to reveal the top 4 cards and put all elf cards revealed into my hand. And I don't know, Messenger. I mean, what was that?
Sylvan Messenger.
Yes. That is the exact card. And it was like, oh, okay, that's fine. Like, I understand that. And like, I was board wiped twice in that whole game. The first time I was board wiped, I was able to Patriarch's Bidding back my entire board, and the second time I was board wiped, everything stayed in the graveyard. I played a Casualties of War, to which the control player decided to wild ricochet that, to then the Banchantment player decided that they were going to counter the copy spell so that my original target stayed, which got rid of Niv Mizzet, Sunforger, Leyline of Anticipation, and a Heliod's Halls of Generosity. I think it is the land with the activated ability to put an enchantment back on top of your library.
Mm-hmm.
So because of that, all right, cool. Yep. The next player, the control player decided that he was going to play. He searched up a emergency power, which shuffles your hand and library back into your deck, and then shuffles your hand and graveyard into your library, and you draw 7 cards. He drew me into 7 cards, and I was like, okay, cool. I got to do stuff with it first before he did. The Banchantment player kind of just like mulled around a little bit, dealt some damage to the control player. The control player said, no, I'm going to deflecting palm that back to you, deal 4 damage back to you, had him under 10, and the other player was at 4. So the control player was at 4, and then the Banchantment player was at 10, and I was at like 66 because I'd used Wolven Riders with the Patriarch's Bidding to pull them all back and then like gain 58 life neither here nor there. And then I was trying to struggle to bring it back. I had 5 tokens on the field plus my commander. I played, Marwyn the Nurturer, played 2 mana dorks. I then played Alyssa Lana Scarblade. And then I swung with my commander, got 2 more damage on the control player, brought him to 1 life, got 2 more tokens, and then cast the elf, the 4-mana elf that I cannot remember the name of, that says when it ETBs, each opponent loses X life, where X is, the amount of creatures you control with the same, have like a creature type in common, or you gain life equal to the amount of creatures you have in common. So I managed to, I had 13 creatures on the field. And I was like, do I win? Do I win? They're like, yes, you won. I was like, yeah, woo! It was kind of short-lived because the control player was like, well, that only happened because X, Y, Z and everything. I'm like, yeah, I get that. I'm like, I understand it. Yes, okay. And he's like, well, he was trying to use the Casualties of War to shoot me back like 6 or 7 more turns. And I was like, man, like I'm already so far behind, but it was the emergency powers for me that kind of shuffled my gas back into my library and they gave me a chance to draw them again, which I kind of did, plus the card I needed to win the game. So That's my play of the day. Elves doing elves things. No matter what power level you're playing elves are, they are still strong no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, nothing makes that more evident than what you just said. And if you go back to the charity stream that we did, where the game ended on like turn 4 to an elves deck.
Yeah, I think that was against Mitch from the commander's quarters. Yes.
Yes, I believe so.
Yes, that was a very fast and interesting game. I didn't actually manage to catch that game myself because I was setting up for the next game, which my next game was I believe it was with Gavin.
But you didn't have a spare 5 minutes?
Unfortunately, no. The back end of that stream was very busy. I will say that it was a lot busier than I expected it to be, but man, it was a lot of fun, and I want to do it again, and I cannot wait to do it again. But rambling aside, we have a full episode to record here, Paul. Now, so we're about 10 minutes into this episode right now, and we haven't even talked about a single Crimson Vow card.
You're right. We should change that.
I'm going to start this off really easy and really, really quickly with Edgar Charmed Groom. It is 2 white and a black for a 4/4 legendary creature vampire noble that says other vampires you control get +1/+1, and when Edgar Charmed Groom dies, return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control. And it transforms into Edgar Markov's Coffin. It is a legendary artifact that says at the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 black and white vampire creature token with lifelink and put a bloodline counter on Edgar Markov's Coffin. Then, if there are 3 or more bloodline counters on it, remove those counters and transform it, which then it transforms back into Edgar Charmed Groom.
There's a lot to take in with this commander, and honestly, when people first saw this, they're like, why doesn't it have red? Original Edgar had red. And I don't disagree. It feels a little lacking in identity because it doesn't have the red. But I think a lot of people are actually seriously sleeping on this card. One of the things that makes a commander particularly powerful in my eyes is when it's hard to permanently deal with. So commanders like Obsidat, Ghost Council, Derevi, the blue-black one that I can't think of, Yuriko. These are all very famous commanders because of how difficult they are to actually... Well, I guess Obsidat maybe not as famous, but they're known for being resilient, right? It's very difficult to get rid of these things permanently. Edgar here is no exception, and in a way, he's actually a little better than just resilient, right? Because not only he's a 4-mana 4/4, he's a lord, but when he dies, he also comes back. He makes you more bodies, which with relevant creature types for his archetype, right? They're all vampires with lifelink, a lot of sustain, a lot of resilience to people trying to attack you while your commander's down. But also, it's important to note that he is an artifact while he's on the field like that, right? Which means that if you blink him, which you can totally do, you're in white, there's lots of ways to do that, he'll come back immediately without paying commander tax or anything. And I think that there's a lot to be said about something that's so difficult to actually truly kill. And for that reason, Edgar gets my number 10 spot here. I think a lot of people are going to overlook him in favor of the original Edgar, and I totally understand that. But I think Edgar at least deserves some love. You do lose some decent vampires without the red, but honestly speaking, a lot of the good vampires are just in black. Yes, you lose a couple lords, you lose a couple of like the card draw vampires, you lose some of the madness stuff, but you really still have a lot of good vampire synergy in just black and white.
Yeah, and I know Mara said that he was going to be doing vampires in all 5 colors as well. So, I mean, the loss of red, I don't think it's that bad because like you said, I mean, there are heaps of ways to flicker things. I mean, we have Brago as a deck and it's mainly all about white flicker. So why can't you do that with Edgar? You know, I think he's really cool, man. I really like him. I know a lot of people have been like meh on him, but like I think you said, they are definitely sleeping on Edgar, and you nailed it. I mean, I guess that's number 10. We should move on to number 9 now, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So number 9 is nowhere near as fancy as Edgar, but our number 9 slot is Honored Heirloom. It is a 3-mana artifact rock, which means it taps for any 1 mana of color, but it also has another active ability of 2 and tap, and you exile target card from a graveyard.
This card is a huge deal, way bigger than it appears on the surface. So it's a known fact that WotC thinks that printing 2-mana acceleration is kind of a mistake. I'm pretty sure that Gavin is on record as saying that Arcane Signet was a mistake.
Yes, he has. Arcane Signet was a huge mistake in their eyes.
And to be fair, I don't disagree. But to incentivize people playing the more expensive mana, they've been attaching these, like somewhat innocuous abilities to them. We had like Letter of Acceptance in Strixhaven, which you could sack to draw a card later or something like that. There's Magnifying Glass that like investigates. That one they did before Arcane Signet, I'm pretty sure. But whatever the case may be, this is perhaps... Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, you had Replicating Ring, which was a 3-mana rock, but also put a night counter on it. And once you had 8 night counters, you got, like, 9 extra copies of that card.
Right. And it's been a trend that they've been doing. And this is perhaps the most exciting one that they've released so far. Honestly, a little bit of a hot take here, maybe not. Not enough people play Graveyard Hate. And to staple it onto something that people are going to play anyway, i.e. Mana Acceleration, is genius. Because now, I'm pretty sure this is a card that is going to see so much play, it's not even like remotely close. This is so far ahead of other 3-mana rocks that it is just so far beyond anything I expected them to print. And it's just at common. It's not even an uncommon. It's not a rare. It's a common. Everybody's going to be able to get this card for super duper cheap. It has relevance in just about every single deck. Pretty much every deck you go against has something to do with the graveyard. It's very rare that they don't. Green decks have Eternal Witness. White decks, like even in this set, have some recursion coming up. Black decks, I mean, come on, let's be real.
So their whole archetype of being black has been able to play out of the graveyard.
Even like red decks have some flashback spells. It's crazy. And Honor Heirloom, colorless answer to all of that. And it accelerates your mana. Wonderful card. This card is an absolute 10 out of 10 slam dunk in my eyes. And that's why here it has my number 9 slot.
Yeah, I saw this card and I was like, damn. It doesn't even say like Commander's Identity. It just says add 1 mana of any color. It's mana fixing at the best rate, and it's graveyard hate as well at the best rate. So yeah, I totally agree with you. 10 out of 10 card design. Mwah, chef's kiss. Let's move on to number 8. Because again, you nail everything. I mean, there's not much else I can say about these cards. Which is, it's not a bad thing whatsoever. So our number 8 slot here is Wash Away. It is a 1 blue instant with Cleave, which is a brand new mechanic, but I'm going to read the card first before I actually explain what Cleave is, because it's a little bit difficult to explain, I think. Kind of on audio only, but if you're watching the YouTube video, there should be a card on screen. If not, I do apologize. So Wash Away is a 1 blue instant with Cleave. So it says counter target spell, and then in square brackets, it says that wasn't cast from its owner's hand, end square brackets. Now, Cleave is like Overload. So it's 1 blue, and it says you may cast this spell for its Cleave cost. If you do, remove the words in the square brackets. So if you cast it for 1, you can only counter target spell that wasn't cast from its owner's hand. Or for 3 mana, you can just counter target spell.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure the flavor on Cleave is you are, quote, cutting off, end quote, the extra text. Pretty sure that's why it's called Cleave.
Yeah, because you're cleaving it off, essentially.
Yeah. But at any rate, this is just a very versatile card. More often than not, I'd say 90% of the time, you're casting this just for a single blue, and it may as well just read counter target commander. Yeah. This card, I considered not even having it on this list because I think it's bordering on too powerful for commander. But ultimately, I think a card like this is actually a necessary evil because of how many just ridiculously powerful commanders we've been experiencing over the past 3 or 4 years. We have Cullen, we've got Yuriko is a good example, actually, because there's not really a lot of good ways to deal with her. Although actually Wash Away doesn't actually counter Yuriko because she has ninjutsu. Anyway, Wash Away hits a lot of very important cards. It also hits Foretold cards for what that's worth. It handles a lot of the cast stuff from exile cards that we've been seeing a lot of, like Prosper. A lot of red cards do that as well. Just a very good card. Even if it only counters commanders, it's still really good. I expect to see this pretty much in every single blue deck imaginable. Later on in the game, if everybody's commander's out already, you just have a counterspell in your hand for 3, which isn't the most efficient, but it's better than just having a dead card in your hand, you know? So, amazing card. I really like the design on this. I was a little hesitant about it at first, but again, like I said, I think it's kind of necessary these days. So, that's why it gets my number 8 spot here.
All right, then. Agree with everything you just said there, Paul. Never not agree with a card that has, essentially, it's modal. You could almost say that it's very much a modal spell, and we know how much you love modal spells.
Cleave is modal, technically. You're not wrong.
Yeah. I mean, am I ever wrong?
No.
Cool. I would say yes, but anyway. So our number 7, I almost said number 9. Our number 7 slot here is Olivia Crimson Bride. 4 and Rakdos, so black and a red for a 3/4 legendary creature vampire noble with flying and haste. Whenever Olivia Crimson Bride attacks, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped and attacking. It gains, when you don't control a legendary vampire, exile this creature.
I have seen an alarmingly high number of people say like, oh, too expensive, 6 mana. And I'm just thinking to myself, people play Alesha already, and this is literally Alesha with just without the power restriction. Yes, you exile the creature when you don't control a legendary vampire, but it's important to know a few things here. First of all, it innately has haste and flying. That's huge. One of the biggest problems with Alesha is that you cast her, and if you don't have a way to give her haste, it's a wasted turn, or like you're not getting value that turn. Whereas with Olivia, she already has an answer to that problem. She can just come in, attack, reanimate something for free, mind you. You still have to pay for Alesha's, and that's it. And it can be anything. It can be like a Sepulchral Primordial, which gets you 3 more creatures after that. Not to mention that when you don't control a legendary vampire, you exile the creature, sure, but it doesn't say when that creature would leave the battlefield, you exile it, which means that you are still free to sacrifice that creature. You're still free to bounce that creature to your hand, and it'll just die, or it'll just go to your hand. It's not going to get exiled. Amazing card. Honestly, I hate that so many people are smack talking this card. I think it is amazing. I am honestly considering either reworking Alesha into Olivia, like just cut the white entirely and just make that deck into Olivia, or making an Olivia deck, because this card is just absolutely insane.
Do it. I want to see you do it, Paul, because I want to see how you would do it. And then
I've got a lot of decks in my plate, so it might be a little further down the line, but we'll see.
That's fine. If you do it, we can tech it on the YouTube channel.
Sounds good.
Check it out. Let's move on now. We move on to our number 6 slot here, and that is Dollhouse of Horrors. It is a 5 mana artifact with an activated ability of 1 and tap. Exile a creature card from your graveyard. You create a token that's a copy of the exiled card, except it's a 0/0 construct artifact in addition to its other types, and it has this creature gets +1/+1 for each construct you control. It gains haste until end of turn, activate only as a sorcery.
Dollhouse of Horrors is a card that, because it's colorless, it now basically allows graveyard shenanigans for every single color. So it makes a token that is an exact copy of the exiled card, except it becomes a construct, basically. Now, obviously, this card is particularly scary in Urza decks, which play a lot of artifact creatures. And when those creatures go to the graveyard, Urza can then turn them into constructs. Dollhouse can turn them into constructs, and it can get kind of out of hand from there. But where this is particularly interesting is with token matters commanders, with creatures that actually create tokens when they enter the battlefield. This makes things like Tristani's Summoner a little more interesting. Obviously, that card's not particularly great, but it does make it slightly more interesting in that you can essentially do it twice, like when you cast it and then it dies, and you exile it with Dollhouse of Horrors. Or you can just pitch it to the graveyard somehow through some discard outlet or something, and just avoid paying that 7 mana altogether, I was telling James before we started, we both have Girid decks, that this card is kind of insane with Girid, for obvious reasons, because then you have a token Girid, you get to avoid Girid's commander attacks every other cast. Pretty good stuff, really good card, very happy that it's colorless and not like black or red or something like that. Gives it a lot more interesting utility. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that I'm not thinking of that's very interesting with this. In particular, Mere Battlesphere is probably pretty scary with this card. But I digress. Really good card, really well designed, and for that reason, it's got my number 6 slot here.
And then the last card we're going to talk about before we hit an ad break is our number 5 slot, and that is Hullbreaker Horror. It is 5 and 2 blue, so a 7 mana value. For a 7/8 Kraken Horror with Flash, this spell cannot be countered. Whenever you cast a spell, choose up to 1. Return target spell you don't control to its owner's hand, or return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand.
This card is everything that Commander was originally about. It is a big, flashy, literally, spell that has a big effect almost instantly. It's a 7/8 with Flash, and it can't be countered. That alone is, ridiculous. But in addition, now, while it's on the field, whenever you cast a spell, you get to bounce a spell that you don't control to its owner's hand. Bear in mind, it does say return target spell, which means that it has to be on the stack, which means that you can return things that can't be countered from the stack to its owner's hand. Very important to note, because I'm pretty sure a lot of people are going to maybe not understand how that works, because that wording doesn't come up all that often. But anyway, it's important to note that you can't bounce your own spells, so you can't go infinite with the pacts, Pact of Negation, Pact of the Titan, or whatever. Can't do that. However, it does have its own protection built in. Its second text says return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. That does not say that you do not control, which means that if you have any spell open when somebody tries to kill your Hullbreaker Horror, you cast that spell, you can bounce the Hullbreaker Horror to your hand. Now, obviously, you can also bounce opponent's permanents, which is usually pretty good, but it's very important to note that it can bounce itself, which makes this thing, combined with the fact that it has Flash and it's not counterable, extremely difficult to deal with. If this thing was legendary, it would be an absolute house. And I'm kind of glad they didn't make it legendary. But this is exactly the kind of support that this whole giant sea creature theme needed. There's another blue-black guy in here that kind of supports that, but I didn't think he was particularly amazing. This card, however, is the bee's knees. I love it, and I love everything about it. And it's got my number 5 slot.
I saw this card and was thinking it's a replacement is it Tidespout Tyrant?
Yes, that is the card that you're thinking of, yes.
Cool.
8 mana.
That is the
5/5.
one I was thinking of. Yeah. But I mean, this, again, it's got Flash, can't be countered. If you were to have a bounce spell in your hand, you could bounce 2 things. You basically play anything, you bounce something, and it's just, it's really good at slowing your opponents down, especially in spell slinging decks where they want to usually get out a couple of payoffs and then cast a lot of little cantrips. And if you can cantrip yourself into more cards and then, return your opponent's biggest threats that are non-land permanents, that's perfect. Someone goes to Cyclonic Rift, just throw a cantrip out there and return it back to their hand. They've just wasted 7 mana.
Yeah,
stuff that. That's huge.
A couple things. First of all, Tidespout Tyrant can actually bounce any permanent, including lands. So it's not a 1-for-1 swap. But I didn't even realize this. If you have 2 0-cost artifacts, you actually can kind of go infinite with casting spells with Hullbreaker Horror.
Yeah.
Because you play one, bounce the other, play the next one, bounce the other, and so on and so forth.
Yep.
I'm sure there's a very easy way to break that. I don't feel like thinking about it too much because I just love the card so much without even breaking it.
Like you said, two 0-drop mana rocks realistically would just go infinite with this because you just Jeweled Lotus and a Lotus Petal. They're both 0-drop artifacts. Drop one, bounce the other, drop the other one, bounce the other, keep going, Infinite Storm, and then Brain Freeze if you need to.
Oh wait, here you go. Mox Opal, Mox Amber. There you go.
Yeah. That works too, I guess, if you really want to go that route. But anyway, we're going to pass through our combat phase now, and we're going to hear a message from our sponsors right now. Welcome back from that ad break. We're going to get through to our main phase 2 and continue listing our top 10 favorite cards in Innistrad Crimson Vow. So we'll start off this second half here with a white card. It's called By Invitation Only. It is our number 4 slot. It is 3 and 2 white for a sorcery that says choose a number between 0 and 13. Each player sacrifices that many creatures.
I love whiteboard wipes that get rid of creatures and or permanents in unconventional ways. Namely things that get around hexproof and indestructible. A couple of my favorite board wipes of all time in white are not Day of Judgment, Final Judgment, the one from Kamigawa, Exile All Creatures. That one's awesome, and the art is sick on it. Also, Hollowed Burial. That one is really unique. I wish they would do more like that. It's put all creatures on the bottom of their owners' libraries. But by invitation only is actually also pretty unique in that you get to choose how many creatures each player sacrifices, which means that if you have more creatures than everybody else, you actually get to come out on the winning end of this card, right? So let's say you have, just as an example, let's say you have 5 creatures and everybody else has 2, right? You say, okay, we're each going to sacrifice 2 creatures. You get to keep 3 of yours still, which means you just get to get rid of your 2 worst ones and everybody else is clean wiped. That's awesome. And you can go up to 13. It says choose a number between 0 and 13. Not sure why you'd ever choose 0, like why even cast this spell at that point. But yeah, you can get rid of up to 13 creatures. That's crazy. This card is sick. An amazing white card. I really love the design of this, and honestly, it's the kind of board wipe that white really needs. It's one that allows it to actually come out on the winning end of that exchange. Typically, board wipes in white are pretty awkward because you're wiping your own board as well, and generally in white, that means that you're not really in a good position to win anyway. But this one you can actually use from a winning position, much like Armageddon and Ravages of War, to enhance that winning position or to, further capitalize on it. So great card. Really glad that white is getting some help in this set, and that's why it gets my number 4 slot here.
Can I just say that we do not condone mass land destruction here on the podcast?
I don't condone it if you're doing it spitefully, but honestly, from Magic's inception, land destruction was white's way of capitalizing on its advantage, right? Like if I have 6 creatures on the field, everybody else has nothing, and I Armageddon, I'm winning that game most of the time. Just saying.
Very true. I just didn't want to be like, well, these guys said that land destruction's okay, and kind of take it way out of context. So as long as you're doing it in a winning position, I mean, it's kind of the same thing with like Cyclonic Rift and stuff. That is a whole different discussion for another day. I love by invitation only, like you said. If you hold a commanding leader of your opponents, you can kind of slow them down even further so that you can win the game. It's fantastic. It's exactly what white needed, and it's I guess it's a modal kind of board wipe as well, because you get to choose the amount that you get to sacrifice. So
that's true. Technically, card. It's got 14 different modes, 0 through 13.
Exactly. And because it's a modal spell, of course it's on your list at number 4. All right, in the number 3 slot here, we have Everbrook Caretaker. She's 4 and 2 green for a 4/4 human werewolf with hexproof that says at the beginning of combat on your turn, put 2 +1/+1 counters on another target creature you control, and it has Daybound, which we know from the last set, but just as a recapping reminder, if a player casts no spells during their own turn, it becomes night next turn, and then she transforms into Hollowhenge Huntmaster. It is a 6/6 green werewolf with hexproof, and other permanents you control have hexproof. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put 2 +1/+1 counters on each creature you control and has Nightbound. So again, if a player casts at least 2 spells during their turn, it becomes day next turn.
The only place this card will be more broken than Commander is Limited, which is what everybody's pretty much talking about, is how do you beat this card in Limited? And I think the answer is you just concede that game and move on to the next one. But outside of that, this card is just like, even on the front side, innate hexproof, it makes other things bigger, including your commander, or if you have things that care about being large, which is like pretty much everything. I don't know. You're in green. Things like being big. This card is just insane. And then when you flip it, it's just like, it's like Shalai on some kind of performance enhancing medication, which I'm intentionally being very liberal with that statement there for obvious reasons. But this card is cracked. It is insane how good it is. I cannot believe that they have printed a card like this. I don't think it's overpowered. I think it's right at a sweet spot for 6 mana, especially since you have to really work for the OP side, which is obviously the werewolf, or the pure werewolf side, I suppose. This card is so powerful, I would honestly put this in some kind of like green-white X deck, or just green-white. And I would play cards like Rule of Law in that deck so that people can't play more than 2 spells a turn, so I just get to keep the werewolf side. It's just so good. It's amazing. I cannot wait to get absolutely destroyed by this card over and over and over. And honestly, like I said, I was telling James before we started recording this episode, it's very obvious from this list that I am like an older commander player, because I just love all these big flashy spells, all these expensive, like 6, 7, 8 mana spells that just do something ridiculous. Great card. I can't wait to play this myself in like basically every deck that I own.
Not gonna lie, I'm probably gonna put this on my old Gnawbone deck.
Yeah, this is really good in old Gnawbone.
I mean, it gives everything +2/+2. That's basically saying you're gonna get like, if you got 4 creatures in the field, that's like an extra 8 treasures from old Gnawbone, plus you get the extra damage on old Gnawbone. Insane. It gives it hexproof, and then flips and turns everything else hexproof. I want to draft this set to see if I can pull this card and just have someone concede as soon as I say, I'm paying 6 mana, including 2 green. What are you going to do? Alright. I have nothing else really to say about that card because you said everything. I just wanted to add that I'm going to add it into my old Gnawbone deck, so watch out for that one.
The only other thing I'll say about this card is it's very notable that the front side is human, and they printed a +1/+1 counter themed human commander deck with the last Innistrad set. I'm just gonna put that out there.
Yeah, Lenore, I think the name of the commander was.
Don't remember, but this card's insane.
All right, a number 2 slot here. So we're getting really close to the end to our number 1 pick. But our number 2 pick is Savio of Olenbach. It is 1 and 2 white for a 1/2 human soldier with training. And now training is a brand new keyword. So it says, whenever this creature attacks with another creature with greater power, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Whenever Savio of Olenbach trains, exile up to 1 other target creature from the battlefield or creature card from a graveyard. When Savio of Olenbach leaves the battlefield, put the exiled cards onto the battlefield under their owner's control.
This is a perfect, very powerful, but not OP white card. So training is kind of like inverted mentor. Mentor was like when the creature with greater power attacks, you can put a +1/+1 counter on something that has less power. So it's just kind of like the inverse of that. But what's important to note about this card is it can be used to remove a very problematic blocker, or it can be used to accrue value from your own graveyard for when this thing dies, right? Like if you tuck something super powerful under this, people aren't really going to want to block it because if it dies, you're just going to get that card back. So let's say that like you have Elishnorn in your graveyard and you attack with Savior and you exile Elishnorn. Are they going to block Savior? Hell no.
Not at all.
They're definitely
Do you want
not going to
Elishnorn
block
back
that
on the
Savior.
field?
And then, but eventually, like, you kind of have to force the situation, right? Like, eventually, this Savior is going to be so big that they kind of have to start blocking. Or, somebody's going to board wipe at some point, and then you're going to come out ahead on that board wipe because you have all this value stored under the Savior. Between this and by invitation only, honestly, White's getting a lot of really strong help in this set that it desperately needed. I would honestly consider these 2 cards not really staples, but cards that I would expect to definitely see a lot of in White decks from here on out. Really cool pieces of strength for White decks. Gives it some more resilience that White has been lacking, and this is a very flavorful way to do it.
Yeah. I was trying to think of how to break this card, and I don't know how to break it, which means it's probably already broken by somebody else. And that's totally
it's
fine.
very hard to break because it specifically has to train for that ability. If it was just when it got a +1/+1 counter, card's broken.
Yeah, I do like that they stapled the training mechanic onto it, and I do like the training mechanic in this, because it kind of gives the feeling that like all of the older like Innistrad legends and all that are kind of like helping the newer characters maybe become legendary creatures. So maybe we'll see like Saviour of Olenbach come back maybe as a legendary creature in then maybe the next Innistrad set. Because he spent so long training with a person who had more power than he did. I don't know. I'm throwing spitball ideas out at the moment. But I kind of like the flip on Mentor. Instead of like, attacking with a big creature and like buffing up your little guys, you're kind of swinging with a big creature and buffing up your little guys. Anyway, enough of that. We have some honorable mentions to get through here, Paul. We have 3 honorable mentions, and they are pretty big. One of them I put on the list because I wasn't sure exactly where to put this card. I have spoken about it a lot on, I did post things on Twitter about it and stuff. But we're going to start off with Ovenwald Oddity. This is a 2 and 2 green 4/4 beast with trample and haste. Even if I stopped there, that is still a fantastic card. But it has an activated ability of 5 and 2 red to transform Ovenwald Oddity into Ovenwald Behemoth. It is an 8/8 beast horror with trample and haste, and other creatures you control get +1/+1 and have trample and haste.
James did just say 5 and 2 red. It is 5 and 2 green. It is a mono green card.
That's my bad.
But that aside, this is basically like having Craterhoof Behemoth as a static ability. Not literally, because obviously it's not like the power toughness buff isn't as great. But every creature you control having trample and haste as soon as they come out is like ridiculous, right? It's one of the best parts about Craterhoof Behemoth is the haste and the trample, because you just get to zoom, get a bunch of damage in right away. People don't really expect it. And not to mention it's an 8/8 trample haste itself. The front side is already a 4/4 with trample and haste. The reason why this didn't quite make the list is because it fills a similar niche to Everbrook Caretaker, but is slightly less unique because we already have a ton of green cards that have a very similar effect to this. Whereas Everbrook Caretaker, it's big, it's flashy, and it's rather unique in the green like play space.
This is another old Gnawbone card.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I was reading it, I'm like, this is going in old Gnawbone 100% because it is a big green stompy deck. It's 8 mana for an 8/8 that gives everything haste and trample and a +1/+1. Just means more treasures, play more creatures, swing in for more damage, get more treasures, play more creatures, do exactly what that deck wants to do. I love this card, but yeah, like you said, I think Avenbrook just does a little bit more than what this card does, and it's unique, it's interesting, it's fun. It has a way to transform, and then it doesn't have a way to transform back, which is cool because it's not like a nightbound, daybound werewolf. But still gives you that flavor of transforming a card.
Yeah, it's also interesting with Old Gnawbone that Ovenwald Oddity actually pays for itself the turn it comes out.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. So it's like a free creature at that point. You get 4 treasures. So you basically just played a 4/4 for free that with haste and trample, and by that time you're usually, kind of getting out. Usually around like turn 4 or so in the games that I've been playing lately, no one's really got anything on the field turn 4, so you can kind of get 4 damage through, or if they want to block, they'll take 3 damage. So I mean, yeah, it's a good rate, good card, fantastic little card there. The next one is Curse of Hospitality. It is 2 and a red, and this one actually is red. For an enchantment or a curse, enchant player, creatures attacking enchanted player have trample, and whenever a creature deals combat damage to enchanted player, that player exiles the top card of their library. Until end of turn, that creature's controller may play that card, and they may pay mana as though it were mana of any color to cast that spell.
All right, there's a lot to unpack here. So first of all, this is like the best curse they've ever printed, bar none, really. Nothing else really even comes close to the amount of value this provides on such an efficient mana costing spell. And I know that a lot of people are like, oh, well, why isn't this on your top 10? This card is so good. And honestly, in my opinion, this card is too good. I could honestly foresee this card being rule zeroed out of a lot of playgroups, because who wouldn't attack the cursed player? It's just free value. It's whenever a creature deals combat damage to that player. So if you attack somebody with 3 creatures and connect with all 3, you exile 3 cards off of their library. And until the end of the turn, you get to play those cards, which means you even get to play lands. And you're not even limited on the mana that you use, because you can use mana as though or mana of any color for those spells. Like, everybody's going to attack that player. This is basically saying kill target player. And I really do not like, personally, the environment that this brings to it kind of not really forces upon a game, but heavily influences. You know, whoever you put this curse on is going to get attacked at least once per turn cycle by each player, so 3 times per turn cycle. It's ridiculous. Not to mention that the creatures that are attacking have trample. Like it's ridiculous. I do not like how powerful this card is, and I do not like the situation that it has, or the situation that it causes upon a single player. Yes, there is a decent amount of enchantment and artifact removal, but I feel like the only person who's going to remove this spell is the person who's enchanted, and who knows if the other players are going to exile their removal spells for this card while they're attacking them. So I put this one in the honorable mentions because I knew it was going to come up. I don't like the card. I think it's a little too good, and that's why it's not on the actual list.
Not to mention, we also got, is it Lindy or Lind, the curse commander, that says you can move curses around. So you just put it on one person. Everyone swings to that person. Once they die, it goes to your graveyard or whatever. You can then move it around, or however she works exactly, and move it to the next person, and then have them attack that person. Yeah, it's kind of like you kill the cursed player no matter what. Like, there is no downside to attacking that cursed player. Like you said, yeah, it's just it's a kill player .exe card, really. It's like, you're going to be killing this player no matter what, because that's what you want to do. So you can, basically cast their library for whatever mana you want to spend on it.
Yeah, there's also there's like what's his name? Gwyn? Arcanum Weaver or something like that.
Yeah, again, I think it's Mardu?
Yeah, he's Mardu.
It's Mardu enchantments, and you can bring enchantments back from the graveyard for 3 mana.
Yeah. This card's also kind of insane with Saskia. This card's just insane in general, but like it really is just ridiculous.
And the last honorable mention we have here on the list before we get into our number 1 pick is a card that blew up Twitter, blew up my Twitter, and blew up our Commander at Arms Discord server, was Cultivated Colossus. Yes, you've heard of this card. If you haven't heard of this card, it is a 4 and 3 green for a star plant beast with trample that says Cultivated Colossus's power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control, and when Cultivated Colossus enters the battlefield, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. If you do, draw a card, then repeat this process. Now, I wanted to put this on the list. This was my add to the list because I had a lot of discussions about this card on Twitter, on Discord, and how it works and everything. And I just really wanted to jump on here and kind of say it one more time about how the repeat the process actually works. Now, there was kind of discussions of being like, well, do you get to react in between each section? Like, every time you repeat it, do you get to redo it? And it's my understanding and my belief that you don't, because it is part of the resolution of the ETB ability, correct?
That is correct, yes.
So we were talking about it, about, you could just, put a card in and then you could sack it and go into the land and yada yada. But there's no way to get priority until this has resolved. And that includes then ETB abilities of lands that you put on the battlefield. So if you have landfall decks that have, obviously landfall when land ETBs, they're all going to get put on the stack after this card has finished resolving. So it's pretty much repeating until you cannot put another land into play, right?
Yes, correct. Yep.
So we have had this effect before in a couple of cards, and it's always got that failure built into it. So repeat this process is not a new kind of wording that we've had to Magic. It is new to maybe a standard set for a lot of players who haven't been playing Magic for that long. But essentially, it does have an inevitable stopping zone, unless Cultivated Colossus is the only card in your deck, or the only creature in your deck, and you have lands. Like, you have 99 lands or 98 lands, this creature and your commander. So unless maybe you're playing Marath, maybe, and that might be a thing that you want to do, but other than that, yeah. So I just wanted to jump on here and just say that, yes, repeat the process. So this is gonna resolve before everything else gets put on the stack, and then you'll get priority in between each things that resolve on the stack after that. Very good in landfall decks, very good in any deck that, has a way of using lands or anything. This card made Abundance shoot up in price like 4,000%. I believe I bought my copy of Abundance a whiles back now for like 50 cents for an Urza Saga rare. It is now almost $15 because of Cultivated Colossus, because you have the ability to draw a card, but it's a replacement effect, which doesn't use the stack, by the way. Replacement effects do not use the stack, so it does actually allow you to then look for a land, and then you keep just putting all of your lands into play, and then you'll eventually draw a non-land card, and you will stop the process. But very good in landfall decks that want to have, obviously a lot of landfall triggers in one turn.
I mean, it's just good in general. Landfall decks obviously especially appreciate this. I just think this card is like pretty busted as is. I think an easy fix for this would have been if they said you may put a basic land card from your hand on the battlefield tapped. And honestly, at that point, they could probably even get rid of the tapped part. But this is how the card's going to print. Didn't want to put it on the main 10 because it's been talked to death already. It's kind of a snooze fest at this point. But yeah, amazing card. I expect to see this a lot. And not really much else to say about it that hasn't already been said.
Yeah, exactly. That's the reason why I didn't want to put it on the actual list as number 1 or anything. But it did get an honorable mention list just in the fact that I wanted to explain on the podcast here how it kind of worked, because there was a lot of debate, a lot of discussions on how it was going to resolve and how it was going to work. So, with all that said, we've gone through our top 9 cards, our 3 honorable mentions. It is time now to get to our number 1 pick of Innistrad Crimson Vow. Can I get a drum roll, please? All right, then. No drum
Sorry,
roll.
my mic doesn't pick up that stuff.
That's totally fine. Insert drum roll here. We're talking Toxrill the Corrosive is our number 1 pick. 5 and 2 black for a 7/7 legendary creature slug horror with just the insane amount of text. At the beginning of each end step, put a slime counter on each creature you don't control. Creatures you don't control get -1/-1 for each slime counter on them. Whenever a creature you don't control with a slime counter on it dies, create a 1/1 black slug creature token and has an activated ability of blue and a black. Sacrifice a slug, draw a card.
Okay, so this card is way more busted than I thought it was. I thought it was only at the beginning of your end step. You put a slime counter on each creature you don't
No, it's
control.
each end step.
Each end step.
It
Jesus.
is so dumb.
That means that by the time it comes back to your turn, each creature you don't control has -4/-4. This gets around hexproof. This gets around indestructible. Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, no one's ever going to have a board ever. And you're going to have so many slugs and then be able to just draw cards off them. Talk about like creature denial and resource denial, and then like the ability to shoot ahead by sacrificing creatures to drawing cards. You can also, I mean, you're in black and blue. You've got many ways to like aristocrats that out in black and blue if you wanted to, because a lot of the aristocrats pieces are in black. So you've got like Blood Artist and like Blood Artist-esque effects. You've got stuff like Grave, was it not Grave Titan? You've got Grave Pact and like Dictative Erebos kind of things. This card is insane. I mean, if you wanted to go the other route by like using your slugs to attack, you could also do like in blue, you've got Levitation that kind of gives everything flying. So you can have little flying 1/1 slugs. This card is insanely busted and it is broken. And I do and don't want to see this in a game of Commander, because I play primarily creature decks and I will never keep a field of creatures in my life ever if this resolves.
Yeah, I can't get over how crazy this card is. Actually, unironically, there's also so many ways to give opponents creatures as well. Especially in black. There's like Clackbridge Troll, right, from Eldraine.
Yeah,
gives an opponent like 4 1/1 goats or something. I don't even remember.
Yep.
It's also crazy that this doesn't even say sacrifice another slug. If your opponent's trying to kill this, you can just sacrifice it to itself to cantrip it.
Yeah, dumb.
I know that doesn't seem that crazy, but like it kind of is.
It's got 2 mana. It's got two mana protection, and it also cantrips you as well.
Yeah.
And if this is your commander, it goes back to the command zone, and you just play it again. So I mean, it's a little expensive by being 7 mana, but it also is a 7 mana 7/7. Your opponents aren't going to have any creatures on the field with this card around, and it's a 3-turn clock on one of your opponents for commander damage. So, I mean, at the least, at the worst, like at the absolute worst, this is going to wipe the board consistently of all of your opponent's creatures. And then in 9 turns, you can win the game by just attacking with this creature.
Yeah, this, I understand it's 7 mana, but holy heck, I could not imagine a better payoff for 7 mana. Like, this card is just insane. Not to mention the fact that it uses counters and it's also in blue and black means that it can fit into Atraxa decks real nicely. Do with that information what you will. But
because you can proliferate every single counter on it at the end step. That's disgusting. Is it about time that I build my Atraxa deck then?
I mean, it's going in mine, that's for sure.
I don't have an Atraxa deck yet. I do have an Atraxa just sitting around doing nothing. Maybe I'll do a non-red. I've got so many decks to build already. I'm not even going to worry about it. But Toxrill is going to be one of those decks that I do build, or I'll put it in a different deck. But in the 99, as the commander, this card is an absolute powerhouse.
Yeah, I think there's also an equipment from one of the core sets that, like, when the equipped creature attacks, it gets +1/+1 for each untapped creature you control, something like that.
That sounds legit. It does sound legit.
I'm pretty sure that's a thing. I can't remember what it's called.
I'm sure we will figure it out and we will put it up on Twitter, or I'll put it in the editor's notes when I'm editing this episode. But I mean, do we also mention the disgusting thing that you can do with Toxrill?
Is it Coat of Arms? That's pretty nasty.
I mean, Coat of Arms is pretty dang nasty. You have Slug Tribal at that point. No, I mean, like, there is an interaction that you can do, and we were talking about it before we started recording, because people play it in Elish Norn. But I forgot what the artifact was called again, Paul, and I know you know of it. Okay, so you're able to play Urborg, which then turns all lands into swamps. And then you can play the artifact that Paul just said.
Cormus Bell. Sorry, I didn't realize you were waiting for me to say it.
You're good. And then it turns all swamps into 1/1 creatures. So and then you basically say, I pass my turn. At your end step, all of those creatures that are also lands will get a slime counter on it, giving them -1/-1, and destroying all of your opponent's lands. Now, I don't condone this as mass land destruction, especially in non-white, because we did talk about that like 2 cards ago. But if you wanted to, that is an interaction you can put in the deck. I don't say do it, but I mean, if you really want to like annoy your opponents and never be able to play this deck ever again with your play group, do that. But if you don't, just maybe keep that little interaction out of it. I did see it and I was like, damn, that's kind of gross. And then Paul informed me that they also play in mono white Elish Norn decks.
Yeah, I actually used to have that in my Elish Norn deck, but it felt a little too cheeky.
I mean, again, in mono white, if you're destroying everybody's lands and you have Elish Norn on the field, you're basically winning that game, right? It's kind of the same deal, but with this in Dimir colors, where you have a lot more other routes to go. So you don't really have to rely so much on the mass land destruction of everybody's swamps.
Well, it's also a little more difficult to interact with an Elish Norn, because Elish Norn is a static debuff applied to everything at the same time, whereas Toxrill has to make it to the end step. So, like, as soon as you resolve Cormus Bell, since people can't resolve through you playing a land, you can just play Urborg right after that resolves, and boom, there goes your lands.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, not to end on a sour note, Toxrill, fantastic. But that's it. That was our top 10 cards of Innistrad Crimson Vow that we have seen thus far. If you want to get at us, or you want to talk to us about some of these cards, or maybe have cards that we missed that should have been on this list, you can do that at Twitter. You can do that on Twitter and Instagram at CMDR@arms. If you want to check out any of our deck techs and this podcast on YouTube, you can do that at youtube.com/commanderatarms. If you want to pick up any of these cards, pre-order them, or pick up any sealed products while supporting local game stores and getting stuff shipped directly to your house, as well as giving us a small kickback, you can do that through our TCG affiliate link. That is tcgplayer.com/commanderatarms. We have our merch shirt still on sale. The link will be in the show note below. It will take you to our Bad Fred Design Co. shop that hosts our shirt. So go check out that and everything else that they sell as well. They do a lot of really cool stuff, and I believe there's some more stuff coming out very shortly. If you want to help support our show directly, you can do that through patreon.com/commanderatarm and become a patron. We have 3 different tiers in there. Everyone gets access to the Discord server, but patrons get a little bit of added extra bonus as well as interaction with us and kind of theory crafting episode and deck ideas. And with that, Paul, do you have anything you want to say to the lovelies?
Yes. So to everybody who is listening, thank you for taking the time to do so. Even if this is the first and last episode you ever have or ever will listen to, it means a lot to me and James that you took the time to do so, because you could have done literally anything else. You could have gone outside, gotten some fresh air, gone to, like Zaxby's, gotten a nice fried chicken sandwich, which I'm really craving right now. But instead, you took the time to come sit down, or maybe you're in the car tuning in while you're on the way to work or something. Really means a lot to us either way, so thank you for doing that. It also means a lot to us if you share our name around, if you enjoyed what you just listened to. One of the best parts about the Magic community is how many of us there are. And as such, it's really enjoyable to be able to interact with so many different people of so many varying opinions on an almost daily basis at this point. So, like I said, if you enjoyed what you just listened to, get our name out there with your play group, with your LGS. Say, hey, I just listened to Paul and James. They talked about their top 10 favorite cards from the Crimson Vow set. Maybe you're wearing your Commander at Arms t-shirt while you're doing that on a nice Bella canvas, very comfortable, perfect for the upcoming colder season. Just putting that out there. But anyway, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And go watch that Lucas and Max deck, because I worked hard on that one, and I think you'll appreciate it.
And with that, I'm James.
And I'm Paul.
And you've been listening to the newest episode of the Commander at Arms podcast. And remember to arm yourself with knowledge.
Peace.
See ya.